All right, welcome to my shop. Today we're going to put a fire in the little live steamer. Last night I checked everything out, took the water glass apart, made sure we had good passages on the steam and the water side. The water side had become plugged, so when I went to fill the boiler, I didn't see any water indication until it started coming out the valve on the steam dome. So I drained all the water back out and saved it, put it in the saddle tank because it had treatment in it and I didn't want to waste it. So took the valve off here and I was able to pass a drill bit in and clean out the debris that was caught. They're pretty small passages, so it doesn't take much to plug them. On a full-size steam engine, you'd have to have a secondary means of determining water level, usually a second water glass. On some of the older ones, they might have a set of tricocks or something. I also verified with the hand pump that I can raise the water level in the boiler, so that's working properly. I can draw from either the tender or the saddle tank for that purpose. I checked some of the other valves for leakage by putting some compressed air in the boiler, and things seem to be reasonably tight. I had to tighten up a little bit on the throttle packing right there because those were leaking and they were fairly loose. So today we're going to put steam in it. We're going to check everything else out, make sure that these safeties set and release at the proper times, make sure we don't have any major catastrophic leaks, and we'll also be testing our burners out to make sure we can make enough heat. So the setup I have now is a stack extension with a draft inducer here that's just compressed air because I don't have any auxiliary plumbing fittings for the blower, which is up here. There's no way to isolate this valve from the boiler when I'm trying to make steam and using compressed air. So I'll just do it this way. This seems to be the simplest way on this locomotive. And then we'll oil around while it's warming up. Anything that wiggles gets oil. And then I'll set it up on these oak blocks so that the drivers clear the rail by a little bit, and then we'll run it and make sure we get some of that valve oil circulating through the pistons and valves. And then if all checks out, we'll take it over to Kitsap and continue testing there, and they'll give me the official sign-off. You can see a little bit of steam coming out. We lit it off maybe 15-20 minutes ago, so that indicates we're getting some steam, and it lets some of the oxygen out of the boiler as we're boiling water to try to preserve the metal in there. See, I don't have quite enough blower going there. The fire's starting to come back in the cab a little bit. I was getting used to the settings on the burner and the blower, and since it's the first time I fired it, there's a steep learning curve, but it's looking good. I've got my friend here, Carl Fontz, who's supervising and assisting and helping me troubleshoot some of these things. It's nice to have a second set of eyes. So here we are running it. You can see we've got it up on blocks, testing some things out, looking at the cylinder cock linkage, trying to troubleshoot those. A couple of them wouldn't work properly, so we had to resolve that. But overall, we were pretty happy with the performance.
Yeah, I have to get some more steam up.
Here we've got a view of some of the things we had to deal with. Right in the top center of the screen, you can see the brass valve. That's the check valve for the injector. We had a little bit of particulate in those valves, so we disassembled both of those after we cooled the locomotive down and made sure there was no pressure on it. There was some particulate that was blocking it, preventing them from shutting all the way, so it was blowing back into the water tank on occasion. So we cleaned those out and resolved that issue. Also, on the bottom of the cylinder, you can see two little brass cylinder drain valves. They call those cylinder cocks, and there's linkage, mechanical linkage all the way back to the cab where you can open and close those, and that bleeds out the water condensate when you're trying to get started and warm those cylinders up. Well, the linkage was bound up, so we replaced one of them, and that really freed everything up. We were able to get everything working smoothly like it should, so we're really pleased with that. We're looking at the steam dome here with the whistle, two safety valves, and a drain or fill valve. You can let oxygen and air out when you're warming it up, or you can fill it with water there. And just to the right of that, you can see that little insulated pipe going into the steam dynamo. That's a functional Mosley MO6 It produces 2.5 volts. What I didn't realize is it doesn't have a rectifier, so those are 2.5 volts AC, and I had a DC LED bulb in the headlight, so it didn't blow anything up, so nothing spectacular, but I do need to get a different bulb for the front before I can show you how that works. So next time I fire this up, I'll have that bulb in place and we can see this dynamo do what it's supposed to do and make the right sound for steam locomotive, because anytime you're near a hot steam locomotive, you're going to hear that dynamo whining on top when they're getting ready to run. After we corrected the issue with the boiler check valves and the cylinder cocks, we fired it back up again and wanted to test everything, and so here are the results. Well, here's Katie's perspective. She's a good sport when dealing with all of my hobbies. She took this from her sewing room window as she was working on some seat cushions for a full-size railroad. So we worked together as a team, and she's very supportive. We finished the locomotive up. We're satisfied with the performance, so we put her to bed, and we plan to take it out to Kitsap on Saturday for the final inspection, and they'll sign us off and give us a card that allows us to run it for a year. One thing I didn't mention is when I opened the firebox door and didn't have quite enough blower going, the fire immediately cooked the wiring in the conduit for my cab lights. So I removed those and was able to still keep the headlight because that wire was well clear of the fire, but I'll have to rethink the routing of those cab light wires before I can hook those back up. Here is the locomotive all loaded up and secured in the truck. I have D-rings secured to the boards on the base, and then everything gets tightened down so it squishes down the suspension, keeps everything from hopping above the rail when you hit bumps. Then I also have the locomotive and fuel car secured to the truck bed so they can't move backward or forward. Everything felt really solid. I battened down the hatches, removed the seat cushions, anything that could fly out that was loose. So we're ready to hit the road. On Saturday morning at about 8:30 a.m. I arrived at Kitsap Live Steamers. They're located near Port Orchard, Washington. They were extra helpful in getting me unloaded and helping me use their transfer table to move the locomotive over to a steaming bay. They had air and water available, and the inspector was there to greet me. He and I had been talking for several days about me visiting, so he was all prepared with his paperwork, and we really enjoyed the day there. So here are some pictures and some action. After I checked my water glass and some other initial inspection items, I put a fire in the locomotive, and within about 20 minutes I had some steam coming out of the dome. The inspection went with flying colors, no issues. All of the problems we addressed were still corrected, so I was really pleased with the locomotive performance. This day was extra enjoyable because Fred Firetag, the previous owner of this locomotive, came out to visit. It was fun to see him enjoy the locomotive and see it under steam after he entrusted me to be its next caretaker. Fred has been involved with metallurgy and steam locomotives and all kinds of things to do with casting, foundry work for longer than I've been alive, so he's a wealth of knowledge. So I enjoyed catching up with him and chatting about projects. I ran the locomotive up and down the yard a few times to kind of calibrate my eyes and ears for what the fire required to maintain or build steam or build water at the same time. I also worked the injector and the axle pump and the hand pump to figure out what the requirements were to deliver certain amounts of water to the glass. And once I was comfortable with that, I went out on the main line. And it's just over a mile to go around the whole circuit, but it felt like about 20 because I'm learning the locomotive and watching where I'm going. But I really enjoyed it. It was a fun challenge, and I feel like the next time I go, it'll be that much easier now that I understand where the firing valve needs to be for certain conditions. It's worth noting that I've never fired anything smaller than 44 tons. I'm used to something in the range of 70 to 90 ton logging locomotives. So in a boiler this size, everything happens really fast because you have a small reservoir. But the challenge was fun, and a lot of it felt pretty intuitive. and it's pretty easy to get the hang of it after a while. I also enjoyed the hospitality of the folks at Kitsap for helping me get set up in the steaming bay, and I look forward to making use of my membership there throughout the year. If you like what you see, hit subscribe. My new goal is to try to hit 1,000 subscribers, and I'd really appreciate your support. I'll keep making these videos as long as you guys are interested in watching them.